Welcome to this episode of What's Happening Waupaca. My name is Joni. Today on the show, we are doing something just a little bit different. We are doing a three-part panel discussion. We have guests here from Foundations for Living. We have Darla Ray. Welcome to the show again. We saw you not very long ago.
I know.
It's always nice to have you back.
December, I think.
And we have Matt, who is a Foundations for Living board member. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to be talking about a few different things today. The first thing that we're going to talk about is addiction itself. And I think that this is a really interesting topic because it affects a huge amount of people. I mean, we see the headlines with drunk drivers who have killed people, or heroin busts, or heroin addicts. But that is such a small portion, really, of what the addiction problem is. Do you guys agree?
I do.
Definitely.
Because addiction is something, the definition of addiction is something that takes over your life. And there's a lot of things that can take over your life.
And there's a lot of different stuff that you can be addicted to. I think that we are kind of focusing on drugs and alcohol today and what it does to us as people, as far as how it runs our life and how it changes our life and the life of those people who love us and who we love. So why don't you you defined it briefly by saying that addiction is something that takes over our life.
That we have no control over. I mean, when addiction comes in, it takes over everything when you become addicted. And Matt likes to say that you don't wake up one morning and say, today I'm going to become an alcoholic. It kind of sneaks in there and takes over. And that's what addiction does. It sneaks in, takes over, and then it destroys.
So how long does it take to become addicted to something, Matt?
Well, it varies. It can take as little as a matter of a few days. I just listened to a report recently that, for instance, when people are put on painkillers from a prescription, actually within a matter of a few days, they could become addicted to an opioid, for instance. Other things may take a little longer. It somewhat has to do with the individual. However long it does take to become addicted, it's most certainly serious when you do become addicted.
I read a long time ago that 50% of an addiction is hereditary. Is that something that you guys agree with or not?
The report I heard was like 40%, but definitely there is a heritable trait there. However, it doesn't mean you have to have that to become addicted to something.
They say that if you take, just so you understand the difference between like alcohol and an opioid, you take 100 people, you set them down in a chair, and for 30 days or 21 days, you feed them nothing but alcohol. The people that walk away from that become alcoholics, maybe one or two. But you take 100 people and set them down and feed them an opioid for 21 days, and 100% will become addicted.
So what's the difference? I mean, so now we've turned the conversation from alcoholism, which was the huge thing 20 or 30 years ago, because now we've got heroin is huge in the mix. We've got opioids, which are all over the news and causing serious problems.
And the big one now is gabapentin.
Pardon me?
The new drug that a lot of people don't realize is affecting people. I mean, gabapentin is huge. It's the drug on the street now.
What is it exactly?
Gabapentin is a drug that you take for nerve pain, and it helps if you you've hurt your neck or your back or whatever. You take gabapentin, and it helps you with nerve pain.
Is it an opioid?
No, it's not an opioid. It is not.
It is something totally different, but you can become addicted to it.
And it's prescribed all the time. Matter of fact, I had neck surgery a little over a year ago, and I was still having some nerve issues, and my doctor prescribed gabapentin for me, and I was like, no, that's okay. I don't need the gabapentin.
Wow.
I mean, but it is prescribed just for that reason.
Is it considered a narcotic? So it's something that doctors would
It's not.
tell you? So for someone like me that doesn't understand what it is, that I wouldn't have any idea what they were giving me, or that they were giving me something that was addictive.
Yep.
So tell me then, just briefly, why opioids are so much more addictive than alcohol, because they both change how you feel about the world and how the world affects you.
Well, one of the things, when you're taking an opioid, it's replacing the natural painkillers that your body produces. Your body produces endorphins, for instance, that kill pain. As you're taking these opioids prescribed from a doctor, you begin producing fewer and fewer of the natural painkillers because you're substituting them. And when you go off of those opioids, those natural painkillers are not being produced. So therefore, you're in need of some more opioids. And this is where the addiction cycle begins.
So that's more physical.
Right, and that's the physical side. Now, also addiction, it's pretty commonly known that there's a psychological side to it. So many times that it's a hole in someone's life that they're trying to fill with, it can be alcohol, it can be a prescription drug, it can be heroin, it can be pornography, it can be so many different things that people will try to fill that hole with.
Exactly.
And they may get it full, but then it drains away again. And there that cycle begins.
Because it never is enough long term.
It doesn't satisfy the whole.
It doesn't, exactly. It doesn't do that. So who does it affect? I mean, it affects the person, obviously.
It's a ripple effect. It goes from the person and it goes out to the ones that they love. It goes to our communities. It's just this huge ripple effect, like throwing a little rock in the pond. It affects everyone.
So it's something that we all need to be aware of, and we need to be sensitive to the issue, because somehow, some way. So tell me what the stats are. So now I know that the entire community is affecting me, but what are the statistics of how many people are in my daily life fighting an addiction?
Oh,
You would be shocked
yeah,
if you truly knew.
yeah.
How
That's
many?
that's it.
Phenomenal amount of addiction out there. And it has no boundaries. It affects wealthy people. It affects poor people.
It's hard to give a number of people that are addicted because, and we'll talk about that in a different segment, but there's such a stigma that's attached to addiction that people don't want to talk about the fact that they're
Exactly.
addicted.
Would you guess? Would you say it's 7 out of 10 people, or 8 out of 10 people, or 10 out of 10 people? I mean, would you even hazard a guess for that?
I almost hate to, because I'll probably be corrected, but I would say 4 or 5. I would.
Easily?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
50%.
All right. 50%?
Yeah. But
That's huge.
the other scary part of the statistics is in the state of Wisconsin. The leading killer of people between the ages of 15 to 44 used to be car accidents. It's not anymore. Car accidents aren't even number 2. Car accidents are all the way down to number 4. Number 3 is heart disease. Number 4, and that is because of medications and stuff too. Number 2 is suicide, and number 1 is called poisoning. They don't even want to call it overdosing, they call it poisoning.
And that's where we're going to take a brief pause, because that actually does lead us into the next thing that we are going to talk about. So we're going to take a brief break here, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Waupaca Radio FM 96.3 is the City of Waupaca's community radio station. Waupaca Radio is here to connect you with the activities of your government and community and broadcast a variety of government meetings, community segments, and public safety information. To keep you entertained, Waupaca Radio features a variety of music, including the Morning Polka Show 7 days a week starting at 4 a.m., great oldies throughout the day, and smooth jazz several evenings throughout the week. Tune into Waupaca Radio for your forecast, community calendar, and information on an hourly basis. Learn more about Waupaca Radio by visiting the Waupaca Community Media website at waupaca.tv to learn when different programming is on or how to utilize and get involved with Waupaca Radio. Your radio station is Waupaca Radio, FM 96.3.
Welcome back. You are watching What's Happening Waupaca. We are talking with Darla Ray and Matt from Foundations for Living, and we are talking about addiction. We closed our last segment by talking about how many people it affects and what are the leading causes of death are now for young people in particular. And you said that number one is called poisoning, which is a politically correct way of saying that it is an addiction that is probably drug-induced of some sort.
Well, yeah, and poisoning, though, it kind of skews your numbers a little bit, because poisoning is also the kid that reaches under the sink and pulls out something and drinks. Okay, so
Exactly.
Therefore we take a little bit of the sting away, because we could say, well, it's not everybody that's doing drugs that's dying of poisoning, but
Well,
and that includes alcohol poisoning too, by the way.
and we're gonna, well, which is not all that difficult to do. So we're gonna go into recovery. So we've said that there's a problem, and I think all of us know that there's a problem. We can say, well, you know, it's not really, it's not affecting me, or it's not affecting me that much. But we all do realize that there's a problem. And there's a very big stigma attached to admitting, and we touched on this briefly. I know when I sobered up 30 odd years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My sister told me that I'm not an alcoholic, because that's what it was 30 years ago. I'd have died if it was heroin or opioids. But what she told me was, you're not an alcoholic, you just don't have any willpower.
Oh.
And that's a huge, I mean, that's a huge part of what is going on.
Well, the not having any willpower is part of addiction. I mean, that's what makes it an addiction, is you lose that willpower, because that's how addiction works.
You lose the ability
Correct.
to be able to deal with life
Right.
without the drug of choice.
Without medicating.
Whether it's food or whatever it is. So okay, we're at a point where I know that I, or someone that I love very much, needs some help. And they are at a point where they're saying, I need some help. So do you white knuckle it and say, I can do it by myself? Or do you seek out a recovery program? And what is all of that about?
Well, number one, when somebody wants to go into recovery, especially if it's an opioid addict or meth person that's taking methamphetamines, you have this little tiny window when they say, I need help, before they'll use again. And if you can't get them help in that little tiny bitty window, you know, it's scary. I mean, there's just a small window of time when somebody says, help me.
And it used to be, even with alcohol, it used to be that there was a number you could call 24 hours a day, and there were people that were willing to drop whatever it was that they were doing at whatever time it was, including the middle of the night, to come help you. That still exists?
Well, here's the deal with Foundations for Living right now. We just had this whole group of people that went through the recovery coach training. So Foundation said, we need to do something. So we looked at Darjun, and we have, so that there's some consistency that goes across the boards, we have adopted a lot of Darjun's policies, and I believe it's February 1st is when the actual Foundations for Living is having their recovery coach program is going to actually launch.
Okay.
Which is really, really exciting, because we've got right now, I think 13.
I think 13 recovery coaches that we've got working under the umbrella of Foundations for Living.
So then you can call us at 715 942-2725. You can call Foundations for Living. You can come in. We can sit down and talk to you and find out just what, I mean, because we have such a diverse group of people, I mean, it's a hugely diverse group of people, we'd be able to match you up with a recovery coach that you fit well with.
Okay, but what does recovery do for me? I mean, I know I have a problem. I know that I need to stop, so I can just stop.
Well, there's many different paths to recovery.
Yeah.
There's, you know, the normal, the AA classes, the NA classes, and these are all
12-step.
good programs, the 12-step programs. There's many different ways, but as a recovery coach, what we're hoping to do is, you know, be a motivator, a cheerleader. These people can come to us. We'll listen to them. We'll, you know, they can confide in us. We'll discuss what's the plan? What's the next step? You know, as they come, they say, okay, I've got a problem. I realize that I've got a problem. So they make that admission, which is the first big step that they really need to make. And from that point, they may be completely lost on what is the next thing I'm going to do. And we're able to help them with that.
Good.
We have places they can go.
Good.
I guess you could say we're a resource broker.
But it's also about support from the family. It's also about support from the people that you love and who love you. But that takes some learning as well about what addiction is and where they're at and what role, as a person who loves someone who's addicted, I have played a role in that somehow or another.
Well, it's all about building relationships, not only building the relationships that you have with a recovery coach, but rebuilding the relationships that you've, because when you're addicted, doesn't matter what you're addicted to, you destroy relationships. And it's about trying to rebuild those relationships too. And the pathways to recovery there's so many pathways, different pathways. I mean, there is that where you white knuckle it and you make it through. And there's also detox centers that you can go to and detox at.
Right.
You can have somebody go with you and detox, because when you quit, and you quit cold turkey, if you don't have somebody to assist you through that, it's just as dangerous as using the drugs.
And I agree with that. And so with that, what we're going to do when we come back from our break is we are going to talk about the community response and involvement and what kind of goes into that. So we will come back on that note.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for this, what I consider a very important discussion. You're watching What's Happening in Waupaca. I'm Joni, and I'll see you back in a moment.
The Waupaca Recreation Center, featuring programming for all ages. Home of the Waupaca Senior Center and youth programming Friday and Saturday nights, featuring 2 full gyms and space for various sports and activities. Visit the Dance Exercise Studio for a variety of classes. The Rec Center is a safe place to hang out. Also featuring a computer lab and classes, and a meeting room and other facilities available for rent. The Rec Center features different programming and meetings, and is the home of the Parks and Recreation Office. The Waupaca Recreation Center, a great place for all ages and activities. 407 School Street, downtown Waupaca.
Welcome back to What's Happening in Waupaca. I am Joni. We are talking with Darla Ray and Matt from Foundations for Living, and we are talking about addictions today. We've talked about what it is. We've talked about recovery. What do you need to do? Where do you need to go? And we can't possibly, in the time allotted, talk about everything that needs to be talked about. I mean, there is no way I could talk about this stuff for hours on end, and have on many occasions. What we're going to do briefly is we talk about how many people in the community are affected. And you said, you know, 40, 50%. If I had to make a guess, I'd say it's a whole lot higher
People
than that.
affected is everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
In one way or
People
another.
affected one way or another by addiction is everyone.
So, okay, so there's this huge stigma that says oh, I'm never going to admit to that. There's addiction doesn't bother, right? We hear that all the time in that kind of tone of voice that says, I'm too strong for that, or I'm too good for that. That's just for the losers. Addiction is for the losers. Those are the people that are out on the street, the homeless people. So how do we break down the barriers? It took, and I will tell you honestly, that I sobered up on Valentine's Day of 1985. So I will have 33 years in here in another few weeks if I make it, because nothing is guaranteed, right? And it took me a long time before I would admit to anyone outside the group of people, AA, that were helping me rebuild my life. It took me a long time before I would admit that, because the stigma is there. Because suddenly you're looked at differently. Oh,
You're looked at fragile.
You're
that
one
person
of
is fragile, and they're going to make, if you put too much pressure on, they're going to crack. I mean,
well, it's that,
Yeah.
or they're a loser.
or they're a loser.
They
can't do it.
They couldn't handle it like normal people. You're not normal. So how do we help people understand that addiction affects absolutely everyone? We read about the stars, but we're like, yeah, right. You know, how do we help people understand that addiction is just a disease? It doesn't define who I am. It's just a facet of who I am as a human being.
Exactly. You said disease, and that's critical. That's key. It is a disease. It's not a moral failing. Okay. These people, for whatever the reason that they became addicted to whatever they became addicted to, truly not their fault. If they could, they wouldn't have. Like I said before, Darla Ray said, no one wakes up saying, today I want to become an addict. Today I want to become an alcoholic. There's reasons why all that comes to fruition.
When I graduated from college, or what I should say, when I graduated from high school, I never thought that alcohol would become as important to me as it did, or drugs would become as important to me as they did. It was never my plan. I had great plans and ambitions.
So you're telling me that you're not a failure?
I am not a failure. Did I stumble and fall a little bit? Absolutely. But the point is, I didn't stay down. I got back up again.
That's right.
So let's talk. So that leads me into. I mean, we need to get it out into the community that this isn't. I'm not a horrible person because I was an alcoholic. I'm not a horrible person because I couldn't have one. One is never, how does that go? One is too many and 1,000 isn't enough, is the way that, and I don't care what that's addictive. I don't care if it's chocolate. That's the same exact thing. So what happens in this community? I am sober, I am clean, I am in recovery, I'm doing the best that I can do. People are starting to look up to me, I'm becoming involved, and all of a sudden I relapse, whether people realize it right away or whether it comes in down the road because I get caught by somebody. What does that do as far as hurting the reputation of people who are trying to help, and why does it happen?
I think that relapse is bound to happen. I'm not saying that it's at all acceptable. I'm certainly not promoting that someone relapse. As you work your way through recovery, you may begin to let your guard down a little bit. And when that happens is when that addiction that is with you for your entire life, mind you, you're never over being an addict. Once an addict, always an addict. You'll let your guard down a little bit, and that's when that demon, that monster will come back and get you again.
If you look at it this way, let's say the little boy is riding down the road on his bike and he gets hit by a car and he breaks his arm. And the lady gets out and she says, I'm sorry, oh forgive me, I broke your arm. And the little boy says, absolutely, I forgive you. The little boy still has to live with the consequence that he broke his arm. That's not going to go away, but you can move forward. But you have to live and walk through the consequence of your action, even if you do relapse.
But I have, right, but I've lived through the consequences. I paid my dues, and now I look back and, here I am using again. So I have to start over from square one, and I have to go through those, living through the consequences and owning up again. I mean, that's not only difficult for the addict, but it's difficult for all of the support that places like Foundations for Living have tried to get it out in the community. We can help people. We can help people live a different life, because that's what it is. And then it hurts the whole reputation of people who are clean and sober and trying to move forward.
I don't know that it so much hurts them, because, like I said, it's almost predictable that it's going to happen. It's part of recovery, and it happens so often that people relapse. You can't, it's not about falling down, it's about getting back up again. And you go on and you do that. I can honestly say that if it wasn't for myself being an addict, I wouldn't be sitting here today, because it's my addiction and my recovery from and my response to that has brought me to doing things like working with Foundations for Living, becoming a recovery coach. That's what's catapulted me into this position. So I'm not going to let it hold me down.
And I think that that's really necessary to remember, is that the people at Foundations for Living are people who have been touched very personally. Many of you are addicts that are doing the recovery coaching. If you have any questions, contact Foundations for Living. You guys are there to answer questions.
Absolutely.
You're really
We're there
easy
to
to
help.
talk to. The doors are open. Give them a call. Whatever your questions are, right? Give you a call.
Certainly.
So thank you both so much for joining me today. Like I said, I could go on for hours, but I really appreciate the information that you shared with us. I really like the conversation, because I think it's an important one to be having no matter when, but I think it's becoming more important as time goes on.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you for having us.
Yep.
Thank
It's always
you.
fun to hang with you.
Because I'm so fun. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Happening in Waupaca. I'm Joni, and we'll see you next time.